Well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. This is the latest in a series of broadcasts that we've done on the subject of the Building Safety Act. You may recall we did a couple last year, and we thought it might be useful to just get everybody back together and have the opportunity to take stock of what we know so far, and to help inform how we go forward with regard particularly to the registration of buildings and then the development of safety cases. So just by way of start, if I could have the next slide, and we will ask everybody on the call to first of all introduce themselves. So starting with myself, seeing as my picture which is rather flattering. Seeing as that one's first, yeah, I'm Sue Petrie and I'm Director at Rendell & Rittner with responsibility for risk. So I oversee the work of the Health and Safety team, including all things Building Safety Act, as well as overseeing the work of our legal team. Over to Vanessa.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Brandon. I'm not as photogenic as Sue, but I lead the Health and Safety Department in Rendell & Rittner. So my remit covers all of our health and safety functions, including the building safety element and addressing the Building Safety Act. So I'll pass over to Michael.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Harrison. I'm Building Safety Manager within the Building Safety team. I deal with building safety cases, resident engagement strategies and building registrations, and there are 3 coordinators who work with me to deliver this for the clients. And I'll hand over to Peter.
Thanks, Michael. I'm Peter Clark. I'm the Executive Director at Ark, and I have overall responsibility for the entire operational output of the business. I'll pass across to my colleague Shauna.
Thanks, Peter. Hi everybody, my name is Shauna Thornton. I'm a Director of Risk Compliance at Ark and I oversee the Customer Success team, which operates the delivery of the Building Safety Act and the safety case reports for our clients.
Thank you. I think you also win the photogenic competition, Shauna, so there we go.
Thank you.
If we can have the next slide and we'll tell you what we're going to go through today. So obviously we've done the first bit already, the introductions. I just wanted to highlight to you that this part of the broadcast is pre-recorded, and the plan is we'll probably take around about half an hour, 40 minutes to go through this part of the presentation. The idea being that will give us an opportunity for questions and answers at the back end. So we're going to start by describing what we have gleaned and what we understand about the regulators' approach to delivering this. You can imagine there are a vast number of buildings across the UK that are going to be needing safety case reports and certification. So we'll go through what we've gleaned first on that. And then we'll go on to explain a little bit more about what our approach to this is, how we're planning to tackle the safety cases for those clients that have instructed us to do that work. And then we're now at the point where we've actually completed a couple of safety cases. So we will go through what our experiences of that were, what we found during the process. And we hope that then might help to inform some of your decisions and your approach and how you instruct us. And then we've asked Peter and Shauna to come along. Obviously, they're one of a panel of companies that are providing support to us and are preparing our safety cases. So they're going to be going through, obviously they've got a much wider view, having done this on behalf of a number of different clients. So we thought it'd be really useful for them to come along and describe their experiences so far. And then we will be looking forward, a little bit of future gazing as to what we think might be happening from here with regard to safety cases. And then, as I said, at the end, we will throw it out, subject to time, to questions and answers. Please feel free to post any questions as we're going through the presentation, though. And what we will be doing in the background is trying to answer those questions as we go along. And I always say there's no such thing as a daft question. If you're thinking it, then probably somebody else is too. So don't be afraid to ask the difficult questions. What would be really helpful, if you don't mind, is if you could just say your name and where you're from when you raise the questions. That just helps us to know who we're addressing our answers to as well. Okay, I will therefore hand over to Vanessa.
So as mentioned by Sue, I'll be giving a brief overview of the regulator's approach and how we've found it so far. So looking back towards July 2022, we knew that the regulator would be approaching the building assessment certificate invitations through 5 tranches. We also knew that they would be considering building height and cladding as factors on these. However, until more recently, we weren't really aware of the exact nature of the height and CLIG criteria. However, we do now know, and in all honesty, the criteria for tranche 1 is reasonably what our sort of guesstimates were. So tranche 1 buildings are those that are more than 50 metres tall and have 11 or more residential units, and those that are above 30 metres and have more than 227 residential units. And also those buildings that, regardless of height or number of residential units, so it could be 2 residential units and it could be just on the 18 metres, if they have ACM, which is the same cladding as Grenfell Tower had, or certain large panel systems, they are going to be called forward within this first tranche. And the regulator has started inviting buildings within tranche 1 to apply for their building assessment certificates, or a BAC as we're kind of informally calling it. The formal invitation provides 28 calendar days to apply for their BAC, and tranche 1 is formally expected to be from April this year to April next year. Tranche 2 may then start from April 2025 and so forth with the rest of the tranches. Hence, currently our focus is on those that are within tranche 1, as we know they're going to be called forward. So what the regulator's approach is so far, and what it practically means, is that the regulator is asking for the PAPs to submit their building safety case reports with details of their mandatory occurrence reporting system and residents engagement strategy. The PAP must also declare any changes to the building that have been notified, such as an additional storey added, significant changes like that. And any regulator compliance notices that have been declared. We're yet to see any, having said that, and also in confirming that any relevant persons have been shared all the information with. So all this must be done within the 28-day deadline from the date of the invitation to apply. So the submission is done through a portal, and once the information is uploaded, there is a fee of £288 to pay, and the review of the information by the regulator is then charged at £144 per hour. Now, we have asked our property managers to include a fee of up to 72 hours in their budget for this. We're expecting that the regulator would just call forward these buildings within tranches. However, back in May at the regulators conference, they confirmed that they had not yet started to review any of the BAC submissions. So this leads us to think that there may potentially already be a backlog in these reviews. There was also talk that the tranche 1 BAC submissions may also be extended beyond April 2025. Whether this proves to be the case, we don't know, and we also don't know if that will affect when the tranche 1 invitations are sent out, but it is something we will keep an eye out for and no doubt provide an update to you. So moving on to our experiences to date.
Vanessa, just one thing to note, I think, is what we found, our experiences of that is also that they give us a deadline, they give us a heads up, don't they? I guess you're going to go through that and cover that a little bit more here now.
Yeah, absolutely. what I was sort of going to say was that it does sort of seem straightforward, and in a lot of ways it is. And we have now submitted 5 safety cases with another 12 invitations being called forward. So we thought it would be useful to share those experiences exactly as you said, because we weren't expecting that the regulator would give us that heads up email, if you will, which is what Sue was discussing. And what that means is effectively it was an email to advise that within the next quarter that building is going to be invited to apply for their bag. And so weirdly, they tend to go out on a Monday and Thursday. That's what we've found so far. And that has helped us with prioritising those buildings that we have already identified within tranche 1. So those tranche 1 buildings are prioritised, but within that, we've also got another prioritisation because of those heads up. And some of these buildings already have had their back submissions completed, but we've not really had anything back acknowledging the submission, and we're not aware that anyone in the industry has received any feedback so far, which is likely due to the fact that the regulator, as I said earlier, had confirmed they hadn't started those reviews of the submissions. So our first submission deadline was in May, and we've still not heard anything back on that. However, we discussed in our previous broadcast around some of the issues with the portal when registering buildings, and unfortunately we are having much the same with this assessment portal. We've had the same email also being repeatedly sent to the PAPs and to us, so that has created some confusion. However, more frustratingly, the portal has been freezing and not allowing payment. So we're keeping records each and every time this happens, and we are feeding it back to the regulator. I suspect we're not the only organisation it's happening to, and therefore they will be fully aware it's happening across the industry, and hopefully they'll be working on it with the background in the background. They did eventually resolve the issues with the registration portal, so it's not all bad news. There is some hope on that. We have also set up a building safety team, and they focus on the delivery of the safety cases. And each building is assigned a building safety coordinator, and their focus is on those within the tranche 1, with immediate prioritisation, as I mentioned, to those who have had that heads up email. We've also created a panel of consultants who can deliver the safety cases, Ark obviously being one of them, and from each we have a list of mandatory documents that are required to allow a safety case report to be submitted. As soon as the consultant is instructed by our clients, the coordinator gathers those documents immediately. This ensures that the building safety case report can be written by the consultant within the 28-day deadline. And the residents' engagement strategy is one of those mandatory documents which the coordinator creates in conjunction with the PAP. So once the mandatory documents are gathered and the collection of other documents commences, by having more evidence, this will reduce the action plan created by the consultants, which is always our aim. We will work with consultants to have a final draft written, and our aim is to have it 5 days ahead of the submission deadline. The PAP will have their input into the draft and approval before submission. So once all parties are in agreement, the submission will be uploaded into the regulator portal, and then we will, as we currently are, waiting to hear back from the regulator. When not working on those buildings we have been called forward for, coordinators are working on the other tranche 1 buildings to gather documents required to build that safety case in readiness for the invitation from the regulator. And by working in line with the regulator's approach, it helps manage the limited resource within the industry that we have to deliver the safety case reports. We still don't know as yet which reports will be accepted and which won't, and there may be a trend with formats and consultants, but it's still too early to say at this stage. This is not to say that if a client wants us to start gathering that mandatory information, we can't, but it just helps ensure that the resource is focused on the right buildings at the right time. We understand that following the submission of the Building Safety Case report to the regulator, we should expect initial feedback within 48 hours as to whether or not they are likely to require further information to issue, that they are likely to issue the BAC or reject the application. Although it started being called forward back in March, April time with the heads up emails, the initial reports were submitted in May. And we are still only just receiving those first initial emails. So from those of you who are PAPs, you'll also receive the email, and the email contains a link to check the application status. However, as usual, the link hasn't worked. So this seems to be a common theme with links that the regulator has sent us so far. So we're hoping they will be able to pass that through and get those links working. So I'm going to now pass you over to Peter and Shauna from Ark, who will be discussing their safety cases and their experiences.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Yes, if you don't mind moving on, I'll just talk a little bit about who Ark are, first of all, for those that don't know us. So we've been working in safety and compliance in the built environment for the past 30 years. We've been working specifically with what is now the regulator, previously was various government departments, for around about 2.5 years now. So we were very instrumental in the very early stages of the Building Safety Act, when it was the Building Safety Bill, and we worked with the government on what it should look like, what it should contain, and certainly what it shouldn't contain. So we come from a position at Ark of knowledge and input into this act, and that's shaped the way that we have approached the safety case report. As both Sue and Vanessa have pointed out, there's a panel of experts at the disposal of Brendel and Rittner. I think we will all be doing things slightly differently, so we're going to just explain why we do the things that we do the way we do them. If you don't mind moving on, Vanessa. So a very simple 3-stage approach to a safety case report. This comes from our understanding of what a safety case report should do, what it should contain, and what it should achieve at the end of the day. So this comes from that grounded knowledge of working with the regulator now for quite a while, working with them on what the content of a safety case report should be. It's very black and white now. It was, early on everyone was guessing, but passing the secondary legislation means that we can really start to see what these things should look like. So we built our approach like that. We start with an applicability review. We don't want you looking for documents that you just don't need. We want to be proportional in our approach to a safety case report. It should be a very simple document. Now, when you see the final result, there's an awful lot of pages and a lot of content in there. But essentially, we're trying to convey to the regulator, on behalf of the PAB, why that building is safe. So it should be fairly straightforward. There will be some gaps, and don't worry if there's gaps. The regulator, again, is very aware, depending on the age of the building, that you may not have some information. That's okay. We have a team of experts that can work around that and make some assumptions and back those assumptions up with some facts. And once we have that information, we can develop the safety case report. That goes into an initial draft, and we share that with the PAP for approval before that goes to the regulator and is submitted in an application. We never lose sight of the fact that this is the PAP's document and it's written from that perspective. So the people that write it, if you don't mind moving on, Vanessa, the next slide will help to paint a bit of a picture about how Ark works. So we break down your buildings into 4 types, going from simple to standard to complex, and then there's a few buildings that we're describing as complex plus. Now these are, the complexity of a building is not necessarily just the height of the building, although that does play a factor. The complexity will be there may be fire engineered solutions to the design of this building, so it may have been designed in accordance with approved document B of the building regulations when it was built. However, there are some workarounds, some fire engineering solutions that we call them. So these become quite complex, and we need to check that those solutions are effective and they work and they're actually in place. So to do that, we have a team of people. So we have everybody here, from an administrator through to chartered engineers, structural engineers, chartered fire engineers. These become more important the more complex the building. And the reason that we have 3 structural and civil engineers on our books working with us, and the reason that we hire these people is because this is what the government have said and set out, that in terms of competency, we should be looking at people. These reports will be reviewed by structural engineers, so they need to be written by structural engineers. And the same for the fire elements of the build of the safety case report. They need to be, a qualified fire engineer needs to be writing these things. At no point did the government ever said that this is actually okay for you to do yourself. It becomes very, very complex, and when you start to see the fruits of our labour, you'll start to understand why we ask for these documents and why on the back of them we start to make various calculations and we make a case for safety for your buildings. So if you just move on one more, is that this is really the implications of not getting it right. There's a lot of implications of not getting it right, and we think we should explore all of these and make them all known. So the reputational damage is huge, potentially huge. We feel that the regulator, I think Vanessa's absolutely right, they're running behind. We make no bones about it. We think they're kind of catching their own tail at the moment, but they will at some point be wanting to look to make a case and an example of someone. So that reputational damage is really real. The legal repercussions, if we don't do this correctly, if we don't do this right, if we don't treat it in the way that they're expecting us to treat it, the legal repercussions are severe. Your residents trust you. You're the PAP. You have this building that you lose that trust, and it might be trust that you've built up over a period of time, and it's gone. Operational control. What's the worst that could happen here? If we don't look at incidents in your buildings, we can look at operational control being removed and being taken over by the government, taken over by the Building Safety Regulator. That would lead to an economic loss. When you're writing these safety case reports, our methodology, as I say, it's built on solid foundations. We know what the regulator is looking for. We know exactly what the regulator will be scoring these reports on. So we know all the things that need to be in these reports. If you have a report that is produced and it hasn't got those items in it, then, as going back to one of Vanessa's slides, that £144 per hour cost starts to rack up. So they're going to be coming back and forth with questions. So Ark's initial principle was that we would write a document that will go to the regulator, be received by the regulator, be reviewed, and a back issued on the back of it. We want to avoid any back and forth. The more questions they ask, the more money gets racked up. That's out of our control and out of the control of Rendell and Rittner. So there's an awful lot of implications to not getting this right. This is the most important thing that you're going to do as a PAB in this new legal age. So it's incredibly important to take a step back, ensure that you've got the correct information and you're doing this in the right spirit. With that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Shauna she's going to talk a little bit more about the way that Ark produced these safety case reports.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Vanessa, for moving to the next slide. As kind of Vanessa and Sue kind of mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Ark are obviously just one of the experts within the industry that Rendell and Rittner are lucky enough to be working with in the creation of safety case reports. For us, we have our tried and tested methodology. So to date, we've completed over 120 safety case reports, and what we have found is that this methodology works the best. From our side, what we do need alongside working with the BSA team in Rendell and Rittner is also working with you as PAP. So one of the things that we do after we complete the applicability review is to request a meeting with you. So Rendell and Rittner and Ark will be reaching out to you, the PAP, to meet with us to discuss the minimum documents that we need in order to begin begin writing the safety case report. So as we see here, it breaks it down into critical 1 to 6, 7 to 20 is ambers that are required as well, and then 21 to 25 are nice to have that can add extra to that safety case report. But we do need you as an executive sponsor, and Sue, Vanessa, and Michael will know from the number of safety case reports that we've worked on over the last number of weeks, there might be cases where the managing agent, Rental Ritner, will not hold this documentation. It might be sitting with you as PAP. So what we need is that collaboration and cooperation in order to ensure that we meet the deadline of the submission date. What we have found is the minute you receive that advance notice, we would ask that you let Rental Ritner know and also let Ark know if we have been instructed to complete the safety case report for you. What we've typically found is that it takes on average about 20 days for us to write the safety case reports. That's 20 working days. So we do need as much notice as possibly we can. As Vanessa has mentioned, we are working in the background for our Tranche 1 buildings at all times. So you will be meeting with our teams regularly in order to try and gather this documentation, which is very, very important for us to be able to obviously meet the deadlines, and we have not missed a deadline to date, which is really, really good. It's incredibly important for us to be working with you in order to deliver these safety case reports. Interestingly, I know Vanessa covered the Tranche 1 buildings and the criteria, but what we have found working with other clients is that there has been a number of buildings that have not fallen within those categories that have also been called by the regulator as well. So we're working towards that criteria, but it is something to be aware of that. Keep checking the emails that if Rental Ritner have not registered and you've registered those buildings yourself, check the emails that have been provided because you may have received advance notice on those buildings. We have found with a number of clients that don't fall into the Tranche 1 criteria that have also had or have their buildings called forward by the regulator for submission. So we like to think that there is a methodology to the madness in calling them forward, but sometimes there's not. So we'll always say be checking your emails at all times, and that will allow us to provide those safety case reports to you in good time. If we don't have the documentation that's provided on screen, we'll work with you in order to take that proportional approach that Peter has mentioned. So it might be that we need to look at retrospectively applying this type of report to the building, but we'll talk that through with you. So typically what will happen is we'll gather the documentation, we will put together the draft of the safety case report, and then we will present the safety case report to you as PAP and Rental Ritner as the managing agent. So we'll take you through the document. Some documents can range from 50 pages to 100 pages depending on how complex the building is, obviously, and links very much back to what Peter has mentioned about the way in which the number of team members are actually working in creating the safety case reports. And for us, it's important that you understand the structure of the document because it's your document. And at the end, there will be an action plan that we will take you through as well. And it might be, as I said, a number of documents that are required in order to bulk out the safety case report. And to the next slide, Vanessa, if you don't mind. And one of the things we just kind of wanted to cover as well links very much back to the applicability review that Peter had also mentioned. So we need a minimum number of documents in order to write the safety case report, but we also are helping you gather your golden thread. So golden thread will be linked and managed within CUDA. And for CUDA, for us, it's broken down into 3 different grids. You will have your in-use management grid, your design grid, and your management system grid, which is linked to your building safety management system. The applicability review helps you design those grids. So we know that there will be a number of documents that are required in order to write the safety case report. However, the regulator may want to review other documents as part of that golden thread aspect that will be stored on CUDA for you. So it's important to note that if it's not available, then that's absolutely fine. At least you have checked to see if that structural calculation document is available or not. And we'll be able to create and define that golden thread for you on CUDA along with the BSA team in R&R. But it's important to note that we are requesting a number of documents as are other people, but it might be that the regulator is also going to be looking for a number of documents as well as part of that golden thread aspect. That's all from me, Vanessa. Thank you. Back to you.
Lovely. Just to sort of sum up, whilst it looks like this has been going on for a long time, and it certainly does feel like it from us. We are still in the infancy of this process. So looking forward, what do we have to look forward to? So whilst we are still feeling our way through this process somewhat, so is the regulator. And it is unsurprising that over a month's passed and they hadn't reviewed the safety cases and the safety case reports. So whilst we know they are still recruiting people to fill the jobs and setting up teams and processes, that does come with challenges. And with that does come frustrations at our end, as I'm sure it does with theirs as well. We do think that it will be at least a year before the processes such as the consistency on emails, because we haven't received them for all heads up and things like that, will be known. So I mentioned that the fee the regulator is charging, and so did Shauna and Peter, and that is that £144 an hour. And we know that we have budgeted for 72 hours, and that is because the regulator indicated that they think on average that is the amount of time it may take for them to review that. However, we in time, as we start getting through the backs and those effectively invoices, we will start to understand how realistic that 72 hours is and whether or not the regulator overestimated how long it will take or whether or not it was about right. And that will also help us with our budgeting going forward. And we have to acknowledge that the regulator hasn't done this before. And so when they estimated the 72 hours, the industry hadn't even written a safety case report. So there is a good chance that the 72 hours will change, and therefore so will our budgets going forward. Also, after the first 12 months, we should have a much better understanding of how the regulator will be approaching the different reports. If there is any trends on those consultants that the regulator will almost certainly accept versus those that they are likely to reject, and what level of detail is going to be needed in those reports. So whilst we're comfortable with the approach that Ark is taking, it may be that there are other approaches that the regulator also finds acceptable. They may also find that there are others that aren't. So it will be, again, a bit of a wait and see what happens. And finally, we'll also be able to more accurately predict those within the tranches as they have worked their way through tranche 1 based on what's left, so to speak. And with time, we hope that will create some more certainty for our clients who are PAPs, but also picking up those that are a bit of a curveball, so to speak. We haven't really had any of those in our portfolio as yet, but as Shauna said, they certainly do like to throw a curveball every now and then. I will then hand over to Sue to lead on any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will conclude this part of the presentation now, and we will switch over live. Hopefully we've got a few questions already coming in, so we will deal with those. And we've got a couple of other discussion points that we can throw in whilst you're having to think about what questions you would like to raise. So that concludes this part, and we'll switch to live now. Thank you very much. Terrible continuity, as you can see. I've got a different jumper on now. It's just as well that I did explain that before was pre-recorded. Okay, so going forward to any questions, and we've got a couple of really good questions from Sharon. Thank you very much, which we've endeavoured to answer within, as we've gone along, but maybe we can expand on that a little bit in a little bit more detail. The first one, Vanessa, is on the cost and the number of hours. It's probably as well to just clarify that there's two elements to the cost, isn't there? There's the time, well, three elements. There's the time that we will take putting the safety cases together. which is a lower hourly fee of £100. There's the time that Ark will take in actually putting the safety case report together, and there's the time that the regulator will take, which is that element that you cited within the presentation. Have we got any more of a feel now that we've done one or two of these as to whether, because I mean that budget was prepared, you know, several months ago, wasn't it, before any of us have had to do any of these? Have you got any more of a feel for how it's playing out in real life at all?
Somewhat, shall I say. It is going to vary, and that is due to the complexity of the buildings, documentation available, etc. So we've got a very small sample, and when we sent out the budgets and the explanatory notes with it, we did explain we are capping our hourly rate just simply because we feel that's fair, but also it allows some flexibility for those buildings that don't have documentation because it's not required, and also to capture those that we do require to have a lot more documentation available, and just gathering that and allowing for that to be reviewed and make sure that that is appropriate. We're not finding that so far we're using up all of those capped hours, so that is a positive sign so far, so that we're comfortable that that cap is about right, but also the fact that we're not exceeding that currently. We still don't know about the Building Safety Regulator because we just haven't heard back from them, and the buildings that we have submitted are all, whilst it sounds a little bit odd because they are all tranche one, there's complexities around each of those buildings so that they're not necessarily comparable in terms of the size, unit numbers, etc. So there's a lot of variances at play with each of those, but hopefully that helps Sharon on some of her questions.
Thank you. And it is difficult, isn't it? Because this is uncharted territory for everybody, you know, for our expert panel, for us, and also for the regulator. And we are hearing that they've got some recruitment challenges, you know, getting the expertise that's needed into work for the regulator, and that's quite possibly why we've not heard back on the ones that we've put in yet. I think a question for Shauna, really. I mean, you cited in your part of the presentation that you've done 120 safety case reports so far. Have you heard back on any of those now? I know we recorded this a few days ago, so just curious to know.
No, so still the same. A number have been submitted. There has been acknowledgement from the regulator stating that they have received the reports, but to date we have not had anything back. I think it seems to be industry-wide at the moment, from talking with another of other people that are using maybe different suppliers as well that have also submitted their safety case reports. There seems to be acknowledgement but no feedback to date.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question from Sharon was around the tranches and yeah, whether we've got any indication as to whether there's any phasing within tranche one. Have we sort of identified any patterns within tranche one yet, or do we have any feel for when different cases are likely to be called? I will ask that of Vanessa.
So somewhat, no, I mean, we have had some buildings that we didn't necessarily expect to be the first to be called forward, but we also kind of retrospectively understand perhaps why it would have been, i.e. it was one of the first to be registered, so it was probably a bit more aware within the Building Safety Regulator to be called forward. So I think so far with the ones that we have had called forward to apply for their back, they are within that tranche, but I know, and I'll probably pass to Shauna on this, she's aware of some others that within her portfolio that's outside R&R that haven't been.
There seems to be sometimes if a building is maybe has had a visit from the local fire service or has previously had maybe an enforcement or a deficiency notice served on it, these seem to be getting called forward by the regulator as well. To be honest, we're kind of in a bit of a guessing game, a bit like Renton and Rittner and everybody else. There seems to be obviously the tranches that we're following, but have been talking with our clients and obviously with Renton and Rittner and the PAPs that you work with for a very long time. So we're prepared for these curveballs as and when they do occur. We have a very clear methodology. So if it is the case that you do receive advance notice, please just let us know as soon as you possibly can, and we'll work with you to obviously ensure that you can supply your safety case report to the regulator within time.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. And as we said before, this is just so new to all of us, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we get any sense that the process is likely to change over time? And I'm just thinking back to all of the work that we all put into external wall surveys, and originally, obviously, we were basing that work on the advice notes, a series of advice notes that then went on to the consolidated advice, which changed our approach quite radically, and then ultimately wound up with the FRAEWs under PAS 9980. What do we think about this? Do we think that it's going to continue to be as it is now, or do we think that that's likely to change over time?
I think, can I step in, Sue? I think it's a really interesting one, and that comparison is really useful as well, because what happened with external walls resulted, as you say, in a publicly available specification. The government have made it really clear from the outset they're not going to do that with safety cases, so they're very keen to stress that there's not going to be a template or a specification for this. Now, as with most things we've seen so far, that of course it can change. At the moment, I don't think it will. I think particularly as they're finding their feet, you're absolutely right with the recruitment thing as well. The stories we're hearing are challenges in recruitment. Excuse me. They are very actively looking for fire engineers at the moment. We know that because they approach our fire engineers fairly regularly, and we are fairly confident that they're staffed up to a level that they can begin this process, but complete it, I'm not so sure. I don't think it will change a great deal in the short term, and we're definitely in the short term not going to have a specification. Now we've just undergone a huge kind of a seismic shift in the political landscape, so we know what the new government are thinking in terms of fire safety. We know that it's coming right back to the top of the agenda. I think towards the end of the last government, maybe it dropped off a little bit, and we saw the government backing away slightly. So all of that means that this is really it's a very vibrant time, and it could absolutely change at the drop of a hat. But at the moment, we've got no real wind of that happening.
One of the things that makes me wonder is, knowing that resource has been a challenge within the regulator, whether there seems to be a balancing act between making sure buildings are fully safe and potentially maybe over-engineering that, so that whether their views will change and evolve as they go through the process of reviewing safety case reports for more buildings. But I guess it kind of, without having our crystal ball to hand, it's really hard to predict how that's actually going to change in reality, isn't it? If at all. Okay, so we also have a question raised from Aaron, which I'm not going to read the whole thing out. I've published it so everybody can read it, but I think the crux of it is alluding to the fact that the safety case report is a summary of the safety case and how we're dealing with that. And I think making a comparison between preparing safety cases within the context of our industry compared with some higher hazard industries. So I wonder whether, Peter, I could call on you to just clarify how you see that process working.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just reading the text of the question because I think it's quite interesting that we spoke of the safety case report and the golden thread, but not the safety case. In our opinion, the golden thread forms part of your safety case. The safety case is a living, breathing document. So the report is that snapshot that we're producing at any one time. And it's interesting, I mean, your comments about working in high hazard industries, and if we think to where this all came from, and the Dame Judith Hackett report, and look, if you know the history of Judith Hackett and where she came from high hazard industry. So this is where it came from. So we were perplexed too, if I can be honest, that this approach was taking, but it seems to be a reasonable one. I think from what we can see at the moment, it seems to be reasonable. We certainly were skeptical at the start, but having now written quite a few safety case reports, we're really comfortable with the process. We like it. We can see where they were going with it. And we can make a claim for safety for certain buildings, and it's a great feeling. So I think it's got value. It was quite a left field decision when we first saw it, but it's got value, and I think it will stand the test of time.
Thank you. And I guess that probably, to an extent, and I know at the back end of your last answer, maybe we addressed a little bit the extent to which a new government might change the process. And so I think from what you were saying, Peter, you kind of, if anything, expect that there's going to be a refocus on building safety. So the process may be strengthened or modified, but it's a little hard for us to know precisely what that might look like.
It is, but we've got some clues. Sean and I met last week with Peter Apps, who's a journalist for Inside Housing, and he wrote the book on Grenfell, that Show Me the Bodies. And one of the things we talked to him about was the new government and where what insight he's got into what they're going to do. And it was very positive from the perspective of us being safety professionals, and certainly from the perspective of Rendell and Rittner, and the importance that we place on safety. We feel that it's going to be coming back to the forefront. The government's got a huge mandate very early in its parliament. It's got a huge mandate, and then we've got September the 6th. We've got we've got the potential prosecutions will be coming out for Grenfell, so we will see the government's appetite at that point. But talking to Peter Apps, I think the feeling amongst journalists at the moment, the feeling is that they are going to use their mandate, and they are going to double down on the Building Safety Act, and they're going to finish the bits that maybe weren't quite complete. If we think about things like there was certain elements that were great, and there were certain elements we feel the government shied away from. For example, competency as a broad piece, but in a very specific way, competency of the people that conduct your fire risk assessments. We have been calling for years for there to be a central register. We've been calling for a competency framework, and that's been falling on deaf ears. We feel now that that's going to be heard, and we feel that kind of that will certainly start to appear within a year or so. That framework and that register, if you like, which is great news for people like the PAPs. For you guys, it's great news that you can commission people that are qualified and are competent in accordance with government guidelines. So I think there's lots of positive things going to happen, and I think this change is very welcome, certainly very welcome in our industry.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, actually, wouldn't it? Because I mean, one of the things that we're finding already, we've chosen our panel of experts quite carefully, and checked their sort of like accreditations and ability to do this sort of work. But again, because these have never had to be done before, it's a bit of a judgment call, isn't it, as to how people are going to approach this and the quality of the outputs from each of our panel of experts. But one of the things that we have found already, and I'm going to raise a question with Vanessa over this, and some of the feedback from our clients is the level of depth of detail that each of our experts has gone into in the safety cases that they've prepared so far has varied quite significantly, hasn't it? So any thoughts on that, Vanessa, as to where this is likely to land?
Not with any real confidence, I would say. As I kind of alluded to in the sort of the recording earlier, I think we're very comfortable with the way Ark has approached things. They've got a good focus on the structure, because I think there has been a bit of a, like with the health and safety, the focus tends to be on safety. People somewhat forget about the health side, and I think there's a risk in which people will see the safety case as something that is about the safety of the building, fire, sort of safety side, and sort of forgetting the fact that the legislation is there to look at the structure as well. So I do think there will be potentially a kickback from those organisations that haven't strongly, or at least been able to justify the structural element, and I'm hoping that that's not our consultants at all. So yeah, it's hard to say at the moment, but I do think there is that risk in the industry with some organisations that will forget that structure side, as well as including the fire safety.
Okay, thank you. And Peter and Shauna, from your perspective, I know you alluded to the fact there is no prescribed format for these safety case reports. Do you think it would be better if there was? Would it give greater clarity?
Oh, I think the whole industry has been calling for that, haven't they? And the reluctance is really difficult to pin down why they're reluctant to do that. What they have given us is a framework, and they've given us, an index, if you like. We know what they want in there, and we know what they don't want in there. I don't know what you think, Shauna, but I just can't see a template coming.
No, I can't. I feel all they'll provide is the guidance, and I think until we start to get feedback from when they review the safety case reports, that's probably the only thing that we'll expect to see, that we'll know kind of where the direction of travel is going.
I guess one benefit from our perspective and from yours, I mean, we share lots of sort of information and thinking on this, don't we, all the time? So it will be useful for us to hear the feedback that you get from your variety of clients, so we can learn some lessons from that. And similarly from us, we will see feedback on the reports that are prepared from a variety of different professional providers on their safety case reports as well. So I think between us over time, it will become clearer. From our in terms of advising our clients, though, one of the things that I would urge, I know that the temptation for all our clients is to go forward and get everything done, and the safety case reports completed and ready to be called for. But I think that there is great benefit in being quite measured, knowing that we have that heads up email, so we have an amount of time before the case is actually called on. So generally we get 7 or 8 weeks in which to get the safety cases ready and the safety case reports going, and then of course we have the 28 days once they've actually called for the safety case report as well. So I think our view currently certainly is that it is better to try and wait, because if we can wait a little while before we prepare the majority of the safety case reports, then what that does is it allows us to be better informed based on the feedback that we do ultimately get from the regulator. We're just not at that point where we've had any feedback, unfortunately. So although we know from our clients' perspective, it can be, it can create a bit of anxiety, sort of waiting and not acting quickly. Sometimes it's better to be a little bit measured in terms of those timescales and get some better outcomes from that as a result. I can see that we've covered all of the questions that have been raised from our clients now, so hopefully that's addressed any of the key questions they have at this time. I would just like to ask everybody here whether they've got any sort of like final thoughts, any words of advice for our clients or our approach on this. I'm going to start with Vanessa and then go to Shauna and Peter on that, I think.
So for me, I think it's pretty much what you've just said, is don't jump the gun too soon. I think it will be a telling time on when we start getting feedback. It will also help direct us so that we are focusing in the right spot, so that we are able to give our clients a better service, reduce costs, etc. We also, I know we had a client ask earlier before the broadcast, they couldn't make it this evening, whether or not the tranches will be sort of from April 2025 for tranche 2. Do we have an indication of that? We don't yet, and as we're already delayed, it could be that, you know, we're jumping the gun too soon. So I would say work with us, and we will help support our clients.
Okay, thank you. Shauna?
Yeah, I think I agree with Vanessa. I think we're absolutely here to help. As I mentioned throughout the broadcast, we've done over 100 of these safety case reports so far. Our methodology is approved. We're very comfortable with the support that we can offer you. So for those of you PAPs that are signed up to work with Ark, if you do get advance notice for one of your buildings, do reach out and we'll absolutely support in getting that safety case report to you on time. Yeah, we're here to help. Peter?
I think well, it's coming to me last. They've said everything. I think there's it's a kind of a don't panic. We've got this. I think the only thing I would add is let's not lose sight of why these are there. What this is about. The requirement for PAPs to be involved in the safety of their buildings is the correct requirement. You know, I think it's important not to lose sight of that, and it needn't be difficult. You know, I think it absolutely can be. You're in very safe hands, certainly with Rendell and Rittner, so it needn't be difficult. Embrace the change. It's a huge change. It's going to take a while, but embrace it, and we'll all be better for it at the end of the day. Thank you.
And finally, we just have one more question which has just come through, which is a question about whether all these costs are service chargeable. And I think in their case, they've not yet budgeted for the regulator's fees. And then a comment that if we wait, then we'll have leaseholder engagement process that needs time. So just to clarify on that one, we're working separately on the leaseholder engagement strategies. So that's not something that we're hanging fire on. Those are being prepared for each of our buildings, and it will be consulted on. Just in terms of the costs, yes, they are recoverable through service charges. If they've not yet been budgeted, it may just be because when your financial year starts and ends. So don't worry too much about that, but obviously that's something which you can raise with your property manager if you have any concerns, or indeed reach out to myself or Vanessa if you need any further clarification on that. We'd be happy to help on that. So I think that probably concludes everything now. I hope that's been beneficial to everybody, and indeed if there are any other wider questions that you'd like to raise, we're always happy to try and address them. Please bear with us. As I say, we are all learning. This is all new, quite new to all of us, but we are learning quickly. We've got a team specifically there and focused on preparing these safety cases. So we're well placed to be able to give you the support that you need as the PAP. So that's it. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll hopefully see you all again soon.